So we were thinking about resources and support for employees, but then also a place for them to go out and write about these things. And then you looked at it from an organization perspective and you're like, well, what can we provide to them so that these people will come forward to them sooner? We can't they can't make people act a certain way, but what they can do is start having these conversations with employees more often.
Caution. Listening to this podcast may motivate you to make positive changes in your life, identify ways to accelerate your career trajectory, and develop a path towards financial freedom. This is the Career Meets World podcast, and I'm your host, Edward Gorbis, and I've spent the last 10 years focused on helping thousands of people advance their career while in parallel teaching a secret recipe to reach financial independence. And I'm here to share the untold stories of successful people and teach thousands of listeners how to develop a growth mindset. Our minds are malleable, and everyone has the power to change their mindset through perseverance, dedication, and a passion for learning. So if you're ready to skyrocket your business and financial literacy, turn up the volume and let's dive right in. This is the Career Meets World podcast. Welcome back, podcast family. You know what time it is. We have an incredible guest with us today. Her name is Jana Morrin, and she is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Speakfully, which is a platform to help employees and companies grow through the recording and sharing of uncomfortable experiences within the workplace. It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and I want you to know that Speakfully is behind a movement to create psychologically safe environments through its documentation, reporting, and support services. And after experiencing workplace harassment herself, Jana channeled her passion for changing workplace culture by leveraging design and technology to create a platform that decodes the gray area by supporting individuals, human resource departments, and leadership to address and improve workplace issues by creating a safer work environment for all of us. What's up, Jana? It is so nice having you on the show today. I'm super excited to dive into a lot of fun different topics with you, but first and foremost, how are you?
Well, first, thank you for having me, Edward. I appreciate it. How am I? I mean, I don't even know. How is anybody right now? I think it's like the question that we used to say, oh, I'm fine, I'm good. And now I think the normal is, meh, I don't know. How are we? Who knows? The pandemic definitely has thrown a wrench in, I feel like, the day-to-day answer to that, because you just don't know day to day.
Certainly, it's evolving every moment. And that being said, though, what I like about that question now is that people are a little bit more open to sharing how they truly feel.
Right.
It's not your classic pass somebody in the hallway and they, of course, say, good, great, okay, move on. And you don't truly care about what that person says. So
right.
There might be more
Right.
meaning
It's not
in
an
that
automated, not an automated answer anymore. You know, like normally you would say, yeah, I'm fine, even if I wasn't. But yeah, now everyone is definitely more open to saying it, which, yeah, it is refreshing, a little bit refreshing for sure.
For sure. Our subconscious wakes up a little bit and has to
Right.
think about how it feels.
Absolutely, for sure.
So on that note, given that we're all in an interesting state right now, you've been doing some great things this year in building out your company, your platform, speaking openly about your experiences in the workplace. And that's what I really want to learn about today and share with people and share your story and understand who Jana is and how she's built out this great company called Speakfully. So before we get into what you're doing, I want to make sure that we understand who you are and what inspires you, right? You and I have talked about this a little bit before about understanding our why, right? And what's driving us. So rather than just talking about the organization right now, let's just talk about what brings inspiration into the work that you do.
Yeah. So yeah, I think my inspiration really comes from, I mean, at the end of the day, regardless of talking about platform, not platform, I have always had this drive to want to help people and bring purpose. That is what brought purpose to me. Is I know a lot of people say that, sounds cliche, but I truly do love the feeling of being able to help someone in any capacity that I can. And I think that that has shown throughout just my career in general. So I think that's important. What also drives me is, having been in personal experiences of my own that weren't ideal. So my own experiences, I know what it feels like to be in these situations where you kind of feel lost and you aren't sure what to do, and you just this overwhelming feeling of kind of loneliness in some of these situations, specifically to your point in the workplace. And so again, how can I help people? How can I make them not feel like that? Because it was not a good feeling. Or what can I do to make the next person who has to go through something like that and make it, I mean, I can't prevent it from happening, but how can I make it easier for them so that they don't feel, alone a lot of the time is kind of is the feeling that I felt when I went through that in the workplace. So that motivates me and drives me in what I do in a normal day, for sure.
I love that, and I appreciate you sharing that as well.
Mhm.
What's interesting is that I know part of your story obviously comes from pre-pandemic days, and you mentioned
Mhm.
that there's an element of loneliness. And one, I think you and I both can agree that loneliness exists in the workplace for a long time. But I think it's
Mhm.
even more prevalent right now as people are sitting at home. We lack
Right.
this element of community. Everyone's
Yep.
in a fear state. So what do you recommend to people today? Right. I think
Mhm.
you set
Yeah.
on this mission to
Yeah.
some extent overcome loneliness and
Mhm.
empower more people. But what's your recommendation
Right.
for people to kind of combat that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because it changes day to day, I mean, everyone, I feel like it's so crazy because you could feel one way today, like, a certain way, and the next day it's totally different. So it's trying to navigate that. But I mean, I think I personally live by myself. I'm single, live by myself, so I don't really have anyone around me. Period. I mean, I think people have their bubble that they might see one or two people outside or whatever that might be. So I definitely understand the isolation and loneliness in the pandemic. And then also working remote, you aren't seeing those people that you would normally see. And so for me personally, exercise is like a must. I have to do it. Or I mean, I feel like even the people that I speak to, coworkers, like they would know if I don't do it. Cause my mood, I think that it truly sets, um, at, physical or not physical. If it doesn't do anything to me, it's more about the mental. And I do think it significantly helps me just be able to be more positive in general. So I would say, doing something to keep active. And then as much as possible, even though sometimes it's hard, is ensuring that you're reaching out to people as well, and trying to keep that communication with your, whether it's friends and family, so that you can have some of those conversations, even though it might be over video, which isn't the same, but it's better than nothing, because you can kind of get stuck if you don't try to push to keep having those relationships.
For sure. I couldn't agree
Yeah.
with you more.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd recommend to people is you mentioned two specific things. One, exercise. The other one is
Hmm.
connecting with people. And oftentimes I find people saying, oh, I have too much stuff going on throughout the day. I can't do X, Y, and Z. I think if you're hearing this and you're that person, you probably need connection and exercise more than the next person. So carve out 15 minutes to exercise. Start small. Have one
Exactly.
conversation a day, maybe for 15, 20 minutes with somebody. Otherwise, I think we're both seeing people dragged into the news, the noise that's going on right now.
Oh, yeah. And that's another thing too. I hear this out, like I hear all the time people saying, I just have to turn off the news. Yes, turn off the news, go do something, because it's not, I mean, at this point, there's certain things that we can do to try to help change those things, but we can only do so much. And keeping care of yourself and making sure that you are going to be able to be motivated day to day is huge. And I can agree more about carving it out in your day. And otherwise, and don't change it. Like, don't move it, because people could easily say, oh, well, I have this, I'm going to move it to here, and then just don't do it. So it's just making sure you stick to it and hold yourself accountable. And that's the hard part, is the accountability.
Exactly. I think so many people have a to-do list. I always recommend having a not to-do list as well.
Right.
News is number one for me on that one.
Yeah, exactly. I know. It can be intense.
It definitely is. So short of the
Mhm.
news, and we're definitely not going down that rabbit hole.
Right.
You've
Right.
done a really nice job of articulating your experience, especially recently, and you published a blog series that
Mhm.
lays out essentially what sparked your passion for building out what you've done at Speakfully and everything
Mhm.
you're kind of putting out into the world. So I'm curious if you could share a little bit about that experience, because it's
Yeah.
so meaningful. It's so necessary for people to learn and understand and observe what's truly happening in the workplace and how we can
Right.
improve it.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I mean, I always joke and tell people that I could honestly talk about this for 4 hours, because it is, I think the point of the story and then doing the blog series is that there are so many times where it's a bunch of built up experiences to where people fully understand it and then say, oh, versus me just telling them one thing and then them being like, well, I mean, I can kind of see that being something, but then you tell them the 10 to 20 other things, and then they'll go, oh my, and then they have this big reaction. But so I have like very many different versions of the way that I tell it based off of this. But yes, the blog series goes into it very specifically. But for me, I had moved to a new city, was recruited to go to a new job, worked for a C-level employee at an organization that was about 800 employees probably. And throughout my time there, initially, I felt great. I felt like the development in my career is going to go great. I'm always been the same, always, in regards to work, and that is, I I like to work hard for my organization. I'm work hard, play hard. Like, let's get it done. And I am the same personality to everyone that I meet, whether they're my peer or not. And it was going great for the first few months. I felt like my boss had good intentions for me in regards to where I could go and how I could build my career there. And then about 3 months, I would say, after I was there, little things started happening where it made me feel uncomfortable. And that says a lot coming from me, because I can hang with anyone and I can really feel intention, and I feel like I can understand that through people. And so when little instances started happening, it just triggered a red flag, I'd say, for me initially. At first, I would say, well, it's probably nothing. It's probably not a big deal. I'm just gonna go write about it, write down my experience, because it just made me feel better. I'm like, I'm never gonna look at it again. But that didn't happen. I kept going back to that document. I kept going back and writing experience after experience. And it kind of like progressively got more intense when I had to navigate my um, professional relationship with him, because it was very I had to change a lot of my personality a lot of times coming into work, because I didn't know how he was going to react. He took it too, anything that I did, he it directly impacted him, in whatever capacity. So like I talked about through the blog, it was this really roller coaster of emotion and roller coaster of experiences that I was going through. And it's a lot of the gray area. So I like to talk about, like, there is lots of things that are black and white, very, very clear on what's right and what's wrong. There's lots of things that happen that are gray, and that's where you get a buildup of experiences, where that's where I feel like a lot of people get confused and not entirely sure what it is that they're experiencing. So that was kind of what I tried to relay through that and writing that, so that people could kind of understand, without having to sit and talk to me for 3 hours to tell them every single story. But I eventually ended up leaving there. And that's, that's when I kind of reflected a lot on like what I wish I would have had as an employee in that time. Um, and then also what I wish the organization would have had in order for me to come forward sooner. So I think, it was a hard time, and I really was surprised that I was in that situation. I never thought that I would be. No one ever does. But I for sure never thought that I was, because my personality, I have an assertive personality. No one would do that to me. I would never let anyone do that to me. And so that's kind of where I think that can happen a lot to people, and they can all of a sudden be stuck in it and think, oh my God, how did I get here? Like, what happened? It just happened so quickly.
Thank you again for sharing that. I know
Yeah.
you've told that story many times and you've revisited, but I'm sure it's not
Mhm.
easy because, again, this happens to a lot of different people in a lot of different ways.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, it happens, I believe, mostly to women, but certainly there
Mhm.
are cases of workplace abuse when it comes to men as well. So,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
men or women listening, my goal is always to surface things that genuinely happen, and we have to talk about them. That's
Mhm.
the only way they get
Mhm.
better.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
so I think it's so important that you continue to share the story in different ways.
Mhm.
Maybe
Mhm.
condense the 3 hour version, but
Right. Right.
you've done a great job of shedding light on it. Again, certainly recommend reading Jana's blog posts that go into a lot more depth around all the details. That being said, it sparked a movement for you and a
Mhm.
revelation. And that's
Mhm.
where you've channeled all this energy in a very, very positive way to help support other people and
Right.
launch Speakfully. So, can you talk about
Mhm.
that journey, that realization, and what really you're doing right now?
Yeah, I would love to.
Please.
Um, yeah, so like I said, when I had left there, I mean, it was a 6-month journey after this of figuring out what I was going to do. Um, but I reflected obviously a lot after that experience on you know, what 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 do I wish I would have had? What do I wish the organization would have had? And after reflecting on that a lot, that's kind of when me and one of my co-founders started having some conversations back and forth about a platform that would help others in that situation. And so we went back and forth a lot on what that could look like. And one of the things that stuck out to him was the way that I went about and started writing about those experiences. When I started to write about the first time something felt uncomfortable to me, I went and threw a bunch of info into Google Doc, threw in some screenshots. I had no idea what I was doing. I actually didn't even know why I was doing it. And I didn't know if I ever did need it, if I was even putting the right info in there. It just felt therapeutic, I think, or, made me feel better. Um, and so that was one thing that stuck out to him. And so we started talking a lot about that and what we could do to help the employee side on that side of things. But then also, what are the things that I felt when I was in it? I felt, like I said, alone. I needed validation that what I was going through actually was not okay. And so we thought about those two things. So we were thinking about resources and support for employees, but then also a place for them to go out and write about these things. And then you looked at it from an organization perspective and you're like, well, what can we provide to them so that these people will come forward to them sooner? We can't prevent, they can't make people act a certain way, but what they can do is start having these conversations with employees more often, and we can fuel them with that information by some real-time data and analytics, so that the employees can understand that they are there, they are wanting to know what's going on, because they're having these conversations with us regularly. I think that is one thing that happens a lot now, is that I knew that the organization that I was at, I knew that they had a hotline. I knew that, and I knew that from the first day that I started. when they go through the employee handbook. Outside of that, there were no conversations about it, about that type of thing, about, reporting anything outside of the annual training that they have, which seems, to me, it didn't seem very authentic, and that they really, were wanting to. Not that they didn't want to know. I just don't think that it was something that occurred to them that they should be having these conversations regularly, so that people feel more comfortable coming forward sooner, before the day of exit, like in my case. So I think like between that, and then the employee side of things, we're trying to build those two together and try to make it benefit both of them. And that's what Speakfully is. And that's how Speakfully was formed. And that, it wasn't like this, but we actually have a product now, and we have a platform that organizations can provide to their employees, where they can start writing about any potential negative experiences that they have. They can, there's some support and resources in there. There's some pulse surveys, some feedback. So it's all these things. It's all to like, not all employees like to share in the same way, right? And all dependent on what they're going through too. Maybe they feel like sharing this particular topic this way, but maybe they like this particular topic, they feel okay with just sending a little feedback it just depends on the situation that you're in. So we want to try to be able to provide as many options for the employees to submit that feedback and to show that they have a voice and speak up. And again, give those real-time data and analytics to the organization so they can be more proactive versus being reactive with situations.
It's so interesting that you share that, and it all really started from a Word doc, short of the experience itself, but
right. Yeah.
It came from you finding the medium that worked for you, which at that time was the Word doc, and then you kind of spewed everything out on paper, and that turns into a product. So I do want to zoom in on that for just a second to highlight the fact, how do people come up with ideas for companies, for their passions, is just by simple action, right? You could have stewed in that moment, not knowing what to do, but okay. I'm going to take the 2020 typewriter and basically write out everything that's coming from my mind. And then that allowed you to feel better and realize, how do I provide this platform for others? So if you're somebody thinking about building something, it might not come to you today. It might come through different experiences. And that's how products get built. You're just solving some sort of problem. And the problem is that we do not have a constructive kind of proactive way to really enable people to speak up at work. My personal experience, real quick, I'll share this, is that a lot of HR teams, teams, they create maybe a scenario document that explains, here's what you can do in situation X. Those situations are happening all the time. So if you hear it once a year at an at an annual event, you don't remember that you have that support system.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And that's kind of where it comes from, is like these things need to come up more often, in conversations more often with HR teams and their employees, so that they know that they're there. Because again, it's not that I didn't know that they are there. It's not that they're not nice people, because I loved my HR team. I thought they were great. It's just that I wasn't entirely sure what was going to happen when I did come forward. It was terrifying. So it's having these conversations so that people feel comfortable. And I think that it's doable. It's just, it takes some time to build that.
Hey there, listeners. I just wanted to pop in and let you know that as a part of Career Meets World, I am now taking on exclusive one-on-one clients who are hungry leaders or entrepreneurs and want to learn how to succeed under immense pressure. I believe that being an effective business leader is equal parts understanding your subconscious and developing and executing a personalized growth plan. These two aspects continually build upon each other, and my coaching practice is designed to amplify your confidence levels and provide you a toolkit to thrive in any situation. Career Meets World is the ultimate achievement partner, and we support our clients with an always-on approach. So if you're ready to unleash your wildest leadership potential and take control of your success, find Career Meets World or me personally, Edward Gorbis, on LinkedIn and shoot me a short message about your goals with the title, Let's Start. And now it's time to get back to today's episode. So let's talk about the positive, because the good thing is this platform exists now and companies are utilizing, people are finding their voice. Unfortunately, when hopefully there weren't these situations when people needed to speak up. But that being said, you've
Right.
created this platform. Does the platform enable people to share positive things that are happening, or is it predominantly to share things that are challenging or where they feel uncomfortable?
It does allow them to do both. The MVP, so when we started, it was primarily just writing about any negative experiences that you're having in the workplace, or maybe I don't even like to use necessarily negative, because sometimes people just don't even know what it is. They just know it's something, right? So it's like, okay, this felt off, or I'm not entirely sure what this was, but I'm gonna go put it here, and again, maybe I'll never need it, whatever the case might be. But that is primarily what the bulk of the product is, right? But then outside of that, we do have the ability for the employees to just go and write feedback, whether it be positive, negative, neutral, to the organizations, also within the platform. Maybe it's just like a one-off thing, like, hey, the meeting was run really well the other day. I just wanted to give a shout out to your team. And so they can do that within the platform as well. But the bulk of it is, to write about your experiences and submit within the platform to the organization. And the organization in turn can kind of get a pulse of what's happening within the organization on that side thing ahead of time, proactively, versus when it's too late.
Love it. So if somebody's listening right now, they're an individual working at a company, but that company doesn't use Speakfully, how could they potentially utilize the platform if they want to share an experience that happened? They don't know what to make sense of it.
Absolutely. So we have a free product as well. So people can go onto our website at Speakfully, www.speakfully.com. They can sign up for a free account. And they, as an employee, will still have the same features that they would if they were in the org. They obviously can't submit directly to the organization within the platform, but then they can actually export it for their own records, and they can actually then submit it to the organization on their own if they feel privy to doing that. But we didn't want to not have a platform for people that are going through this if their organization doesn't have it. We wanted to still be able to give them something to help in a time where they are unsure, of what's going on. So they have some resources in there as well. And then they can also go and write about their experiences the same way.
That's great. I love that you've built that and enabled people to, again,
Yeah.
at least voice what's happening and
Right.
go back to their people or HR team and communicate with them in a constructive manner. It's the only way we can improve the workplace. What are you
Absolutely.
seeing today with the remote workforce in terms of, look, without getting into details about the type of things that we might have seen in the former workplace when we went into the
Right.
office, what experiences are people having today that they might not even be aware of, but are worth surfacing?
Yeah. So what's interesting now is that I feel like because we're remote, it isn't making any of the problems. It's not making any of the problems not go away. It's just like presenting them differently now, right? So like before, you were in the workplace and they were presented to you in a certain way. These things aren't not happening now. It's just presented differently. And so I think what's interesting now is that when you went to work, you had a separate space and you were in the office, you weren't in your home, and you could separate your personal, and you didn't have to say anything personal, or you didn't have to show anyone your home. You didn't have to, and now we have these Zoom calls and all of them are on video. And now your world, whether your kids are coming up, someone might not even knew you had kids. and then they can see the background and can see, so then it just gives more fuel potentially for bullying, or, you know, people starting to have judgment on you in regards to where you live, your family life, where you can separate those much easier before. So I think that that's different, and that's interesting, and lots of times something I wouldn't have necessarily thought about. And, you know, there also is a lot of the same stuff. So a lot of my experience was over email, internal chat, text messaging. That wasn't all in person, right? This is all still things that happen remotely. So, you know, a lot of those things can still continue on and trickle over, and might even be, I mean, that's happening even more now, those types of communication channels. So the possibility of any sort of toxic, you know, toxicity could happen along those lines as well.
I like that. I personally, again, the type of business that I run where it's predominantly one-on-one working with individual clients and or companies, I don't necessarily feel the same type of corporate workplace environment where somebody
Right.
might judge you by your background or what you're wearing or what
Mm-hmm.
color pillow you
Mm-hmm.
have on your couch. By the way, I love your setup. So that
Oh,
being
thanks.
that being said, if you're listening to this, Jana has a lovely home. But I think those things are really interesting to isolate and recognize this transition and adapt and think about what things are unconscious for us in terms of how we might
Mm-hmm.
judge or perceive or think about somebody and
Mm-hmm.
really decide if that matters, right?
Right.
How we
Right.
think about an individual, in my opinion, does not need to be predicated on what's in the background of their home or where they live.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has different kind of financial situations, but
Right.
even now more than ever, we need empathy and compassion through what's happening. So again, I love the
Absolutely.
fact that you brought up those things. Um, but I want to make sure that we really get to know you even more and really understand
Yeah.
this drive and this thoughtfulness that comes into play as a
Mm-hmm.
leader, right? So you've had these
Mm-hmm.
experiences at a company, you started Speakfully. But I always love to understand people's background and go way back and really
Sure.
look into where you garnered these leadership skills, right? Like what were your
Mm-hmm.
first experiences, teenager, child, college? Like
Mm-hmm.
when was the first time you realized like, okay, I like to lead. I am good at rallying people together and bringing up an idea and or product into the world.
Yeah. Um, how old was I when I think? So, I mean, I've always been very God, that's even the word I'm looking for. I've always been very like bold, outgoing, like just, and I also really love humor a lot. And so I think that that's rallied in storytelling. I think I got that from my dad. My dad is a really good storyteller. And so when he is, you know, talking or telling a joke, he's really good at it. And so everyone's kind of like on their toes. And it's just like one of those things. So I think that I got that from him, in that I just like being able to tell a story and make people laugh. And so I think with that, and then that helps like build, you know, your confidence. And I think outside of that, when it comes to, um, you know, work wise, where I started to see that, I think that just being, taking initiative in any role that you're in, right? Especially no matter where you are, and starting to see by doing that, being recognized for that, that motivated me. And I think that I truly do love, um, I love the leadership type role to take, because I think that I can be very, um, I can read people's pretty well in regards to how they're responding and acting to things, so I can understand by them however they're acting or moving or not. I know how to change the way that I am talking or approaching them. And so I think that that is kind of not, fun, but kind of fun. Like it's kind of like this logic strategy. Like you're just trying to figure out someone and how you can get them to respond to you in the way that you want them to, or in a positive way. So I do like the challenge in that, and I always have. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it just came from when I was younger, because I've always been, you know, my mom will tell me when I was younger, like I would never want to go to bed. I was like the one that just like wanted to hang out. And so she's like, there would be times where I would put you in your room. And then I'm talking like toddler, like 3 or 4. And I put you in your room, put you in bed. You kept trying to come out. And she like have to hold the door, because I just like, no, I want to be like with people and hanging out. And then she'd go in there later and I would cry myself to sleep on the floor, because that's the way that I am. But yeah, I think it was when I was young. I think yeah, my dad started it off, and then kind of like my parents both are very also career driven and minded, and so I got that both. They've always were never like uh we want grandkids, figure out your family. They were never like that. They were always like, you go figure out what you're doing for your career, you work hard at that, figure that out, and everything else will come afterwards. But they've never been pressured in that sense. So they've been big contributors in that for sure.
That's awesome. And it's so healthy to have that type of circumstance. And I think you and
Hmm.
I can both empathize that many people don't.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
That being
Yep.
said, I always say that, especially in the US, you don't need to be a product of your circumstance, and you can change quite
Correct.
literally whatever you
We
want.
Where you want. Yep, absolutely. And I've seen so many people that have overcome, and I actually am amazed by some of the employees that we have at Speakfully. I'm just in awe of, of their circumstances and where they are and how they've persevered and are so successful. And yeah, I understand my privilege in that, absolutely, absolutely.
So that transformation is possible, and I want to make sure that people understand who can help them, how they can find that type of help. So curious, who was the most, not necessarily an individual, it could be a group of people, but who were your biggest supporters growing up? Who'd you learn from the most? Really, who were your mentors?
Yeah. But, like I kind of said, my parents were big advocates. I mean, even you read in my blog series, I don't think I talked about it a ton, but they were the ones that helped me through that. They had experienced their own workplace issues before, they understood the process, but they have been really big advocates career-wise, and helped me throughout my entire career, regardless of just that one situation. Um, so those are huge. I would say that there were little, like just different managers throughout time that in their own rights were really helpful in those moments. I recall one boss who, she was so good at, she could, I could have done something wrong, like not in a super bad way, but something that she didn't agree with. And the way that she would present it to me, it sounded like I wanted to make the change. The way that she did it, it was so smooth and constructive that I'm like, God, and I wouldn't even think about it until after. And I'm like, God, she's good. Like, she's not making it about me and me doing something not right. She'd be like, well, what do you think about this? And she just worded it really well. And so I always thought that was a really good trait to have as a leader, to be able to, word whatever you're trying to convey in a way that like they don't even understand. They might not even know that, um, that it has anything negatively to impact them. I just think that she was really good at that. So there's just lots of little nuggets like that, I think, throughout time.
Certainly. And I think we all
Mhm.
have various people, whether it be managers,
Right.
family members, people we meet through different places that support us, enable
Mm-hmm.
us. I think what you mentioned with this former manager of yours, she's really
Mm-hmm.
clearly good at seeding an idea and making it feel like it's yours.
Right. Right. Yeah.
It's a powerful skill to have. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
so Jana,
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing all of that. And before we let you off the hook, as we do with all of our guests, we
Oh,
always want to make sure we put you through the hot seat and ask you some fun-filled
okay.
questions. So, I want to make sure that you're ready. Are you ready?
Okay, I'm ready. Hit it.
Let's do this.
I
All
think I
right.
am. I think I am.
So if we were going to go to Hollywood right now and just
Okay.
take down the Hollywood sign and you could replace it with one message,
Oh,
what would you put up there?
um, one of my, what would I put up there? One message. God, that's a good one. So there's a couple that I think of, like if we're being like serious or if we're being like fun. But like if we're being fun, like I always say this to all my friends, and so it's like a quote. It's like I always say, "You do you." Like you do you, and so that's what I would say. You do you. Period. Because I do think it's like you do what you're gonna do and get it done. I'm gonna do me. You do you. So I would just say, "You do you."
Love it. Okay. Um, perfect answer. So, look, there is so much going on right now, and you and I both talked about this initially, where we try to not consume news or negative information right
Mhm.
now. So, what are you personally consuming right now? Books, podcasts, newspapers, like journals? What do you enjoy
Yeah,
consuming?
I typically love I do like reading blogs. I mean, to a certain extent, but I get into books, but I have to get like really engaged in order to stay with it. Right now I have it right here actually. I am reading She Said by Jodi Cantor. Have you heard of this?
I
It's
have not.
the reporters that break the sexual harassment story that helps like Me Too. So they broke the Harvey Weinstein story, and it's about how they did it and getting up to that point, and it's really interesting. I just started it. I'm not super far into it, but it's just it's interesting how they got to that point and how they were able to 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 break that story. So that's what I'm reading now. I got it like 2 years ago, so I'm finally starting to read it now. And then I try to read like little nuggets here and there about like there's one in there about sales and the best way to be a good salesman, because being from a startup in a tech world, you got to learn the tricks of the trade. Um, and yeah, I mean those are the kinds of books that I find interesting. I like documentary type, like nonfiction type books like that.
Awesome. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, last question for you.
Okay.
We lift the curtain off the pandemic. Everyone's free to go roam around.
Mm.
Where's the first place you traveled to?
Ooh, first place I had traveled to. Oh God, so many anywhere. But um, I would try to probably go somewhere where I could get there fairly quick, but it needs to be like sun and water and just culture. So like maybe somewhere in South America, um, like around like uh like Honduras or like Guatemala, like the rainforesty like that's my jam. Like I like those
I love it.
places.
Definitely, if you were to ask me that question, that's pretty much what I would say. I'm a
Say,
huge,
yeah,
huge fan of Costa Rica, Panama, Central America.
yeah, put me,
So much
yeah.
beauty.
I
So
had just went to Costa Rica in January, right before the pandemic. Luckily, that was when it was planned. I got it in before.
that's
It
awesome.
was amazing.
What was the location? Where did you stay or did you bop around?
Bopped around, flew into San Jose, and then traveled to that side of the coast, and then went to the other side of the coast, and then flew out of Liberia.
Love
I
it.
went on a 10-day, didn't know anyone, solo traveler, met 10 other solo travelers from all over the world. And then we went on this guided thing together, and it was the most fun trip I've ever had.
Okay. I love that.
It was awesome.
Last question for you. Which side of Costa Rica do you like the most? Pacific side or Caribbean?
Oh, they're so different. One's rainforest, one's not. I would say Caribbean, probably Caribbean. I just like to be on the water, and I mean it was so hot. I like heat. It was a lot warmer
Awesome.
over there.
Speaking of heat, you survived the hot seat. So thank you,
Yay!
Jana. And one final question for you. I know there's plenty of people who have never had a voice and definitely want to share their stories,
Mhm.
speak up, and your platform enables them to do so. If
Mhm.
they want to reach out to you personally, what is the best way for them
Yeah.
to get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I open anyone wanting to talk to me. I've talked to a lot of people as I've been expressing my journey, and I do know that it's helpful. It makes you feel like you're not alone. Um, Trust me, I get it. So anyone can reach out to me. You can either go on LinkedIn and look me up just by my name, Jana Morrin. Otherwise, you can email me directly at jana@speakfully.com.
Awesome. Please make sure to feel comfortable to reach out to Jana. As you can tell, she's an incredible human being and is very,
I
very
really
open
appreciate
and
that.
committed to her mission.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Of course. And thank you, Jana, for joining us today. And as we always say at Career Meets World, go unleash your wildest potential. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Take care. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to the Career Meets World podcast. I would love to get to meet you. There are a couple of ways we can connect. You know I love my LinkedIn. Simply search for Career Meets World or Edward Gorbis and feel free to connect. Second is via Instagram at Career Meets World. And third is through our website. I have a special spot for you full of fun, free resources. All you have to do is go to careermeetsworld.com, subscribe to our newsletter, and we'll provide you the free resources to help you boost your career and reach financial freedom. And if this podcast was helpful to you in any way, please consider rating and reviewing this podcast on Apple Podcasts. This helps us help more people. Simply tap the rate with 5 stars and leave a sentence with what you liked about the podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, strengthening your growth mindset is your ticket to success. I'm Edward Gorbis, and we'll catch you on next week's episode.